This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence, including sexual assault, murder, and discussions of suicide. Some names have been changed to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Buried Evidence, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Katie. This is the story of serial killer Israel Keyes. Part 5. We Are One. This is the fifth and final episode in the Israel Keyes series. In Part 4, Keyes confessed to killing Bill and Lorraine Currier in Essex, Vermont. This confession would be the last time Keyes would outright volunteer the names and details of any of his victims. After a story was leaked to the media in Vermont, Keyes began to close off from investigators and became even more vague with what he revealed about his crimes. In this episode, we'll take a deeper look at the trip Keyes took to Texas after killing Samantha Koenig, a missing person named Deborah Feldman, and other murders Keyes may be responsible for.
I always stop at empty houses, especially if they have for sale signs, and
looking for
just to kill time and check out an area. And I don't know, in Texas I was surprised, like, the security is actually pretty tight. Like, there's most people have gates and locked gates, and so it took me a while to find that place. But yeah, I was just killing time, whatever.
I've always been extremely suspicious of the trip Keyes took to Texas in early February after he killed Samantha Koenig. To refresh your memory, Keyes left for vacation immediately after killing Samantha on February 2nd. He then went on a week-long cruise, followed by a visit to his mom's house to see family in Texas before returning to Alaska on February 18th. Keyes wrote a ransom note that mentioned someone trying to get away in the desert. We know Samantha didn't leave Alaska, so that had me wondering, was there another victim that tried to get away in the desert? Keyes denies that he killed any other victims after Samantha Koenig. However, once you hear the details of this trip, I think you'll agree that it's entirely possible and, in fact, very likely that Keyes killed someone in Texas.
I was kind of on I don't know what you'd call it, maybe like a adrenaline phase or something. I don't know. I know we can't talk about the other case, but, after that whole thing, that was the most publicity I had ever seen for anything that I had ever done. So yeah, I guess I was kind of...
You like the publicity?
High on that, yeah.
Feeling kind of good.
Yeah.
Between the beginning of February and the 16th, when you were kind of on that...
that high that you were talking about.
Before that, I had gone down. I was gone for a couple days, like 2 or 3 days. I don't know. I just got tired of the people there talking to me and stuff, so I just decided to get in my car and think of some excuse to go south and just drive around. So that's what I was doing the whole time.
Where'd you go?
Would have been. I think it was like the 13th and the 14th. I went down, it was further south.
Further south than Dallas or Houston?
No, it was further south from where I ended up going to this bank. There were some banks and stuff that I was looking at. Stephenville was one of them.
You were looking at banks in Stephenville?
Yeah, I never actually went there because I found a bunch of other good ones on the way there. There were some that I was looking at further south from there where the towns were so small that the police station was basically like right next to the bank. So I decided to scrap that plan.
So when you left on the 12th or 13th, when you left Mom's, is that you're out looking for a bank? Is that what you did
or a house or a house? Yeah. No, I don't know what I was I was just looking to do something. I was kind of out of control a little bit. Since the stuff happened in Alaska, I was kind of not... The way I reacted to the whole thing that happened in Alaska was a lot different than... normally I just... Well, like, after the Currier thing in Vermont, it kind of calms me out for a while, and I just went back to Alaska and just worked, like for 6 months and everything business as usual. But after the stuff in Alaska, I couldn't couldn't concentrate anymore on anything but that sort of thing, and just lost interest in work and whatever day-to-day stuff there was, and that's always the reason I've done the kind of things I've done, mostly for the adrenaline. It's not really.
And so then, when you were out in Texas looking at for something to do, what all did you find to do?
I was thinking about taking someone to.
As well.
I was looking at houses. I was looking for an abandoned house, and I was looking for out-of-the-way ATMs. I was going to grab somebody from an ATM and take them to the house, but there were a lot of cops in Texas, so I guess I kind of chickened out a little bit on that. I don't know. Plus, I didn't have my gun with me, the one I usually bring with me.
According to the diary of one of his sisters, Keyes left in the early morning hours before the sun rose on February 13th at about 6:20 a.m. He left a note behind that said, quote, "Gone to fix the windshield and find a place to hide my guns," end quote. No one heard from him again until later that evening when he sent a text that said he was stuck in the mud in the middle of nowhere. They texted him several times offering to come get him, but got no response for more than 24 hours. In the evening hours of February 14th, Keyes sent a text telling them he was at a mall in Clayburn, Texas. Concerned, Keyes' mom and sisters went to the mall to pick him up, but he wasn't there. They wound up sleeping in their van that night waiting for him. When they finally got a call back from Keyes the next morning, February 15th, he said he was on the other side of the mall. Keyes told his family a wild story about how he ran out of gas, his credit cards were frozen, he hadn't eaten or slept in 2 days, and had gotten his car stuck in the mud. There was mud all over the car, but Keyes couldn't give them a good explanation for where he got stuck or what he was doing. While he was MIA, he missed his flight back to Alaska, and his mom had to help him purchase new tickets so he and his daughter could get back home.
What was the whole getting stuck in the mud thing in Texas? Where was that?
Oh, that was down south. I was out looking at churches and houses.
Was that before
the bank robbery?
It was before the bank robbery, okay.
Yeah, that whole thing kind of backfired on me because I was thinking I had plenty of time to go down south and do something. I just felt like I needed to get away from everybody and clear my head because I didn't really feel like I was I was having a hard time acting normal, I guess, and so I just decided to get away and go down. And I had been thinking about doing a bank robbery, so I was driving around, but the more I drove around, I was thinking I wasn't going to do it because there were so many cameras in Texas and there were so many police and there were fences everywhere. You know, it just was a lot different than most of the places I've done stuff. And, and then I missed the flight that I had scheduled, and I had clients who probably would have put money in the account, but after that, after I missed the flight, my mom, she loaned me some money or something, and I was like, well, now I'm going to do a bank robbery because I'm not going to call my clients and ask them for money. That's just a pain, so.
Did you actually get stuck in the mud somewhere?
Yeah.
And somebody had to pull you out?
No, I actually got out by myself, but, but no, I just, the longer I stayed out of Dallas, the longer I was down south, the more I was thinking I wanted to do something else.
Several media outlets have suggested that one particular missing person could potentially be a victim of Keyes. James Lamar Tidwell Jr. went missing under suspicious circumstances. He was last seen by his boss on February 15th, 2012 at about 5:30 a.m. after finishing the night shift. He was supposed to come back to work in the afternoon to do some overtime, but he never showed. 2 weeks later, on February 29th, his white 1979 Ford pickup truck was found on the side of the road in Mount Enterprise, Texas, which is about 5 miles from his home. His glasses were on the seat, but his phone, wallet, and keys were all missing. Foul play is suspected in the case, and while the dates and locations line up, no official statement by the FBI has connected Mr. Tidwell's disappearance to Israel Keyes. Investigators found a receipt from a Walmart in Jacksonville, Texas, dated February 17th, 2012 at 11:29 a.m. that revealed Keyes had purchased the following items: a folding shovel, lubricant, and air freshener conditioner spray. Footage captured at the Walmart showed Keyes exit the store and get into a dark-colored SUV. Keyes told investigators that he burned a house down in a town called Alto, Texas, which would later be determined to be Aledo, Texas, and he robbed a bank in Azle during this trip. A picture obtained from National Bank of Texas during the robbery revealed Keyes wearing a mask and a hard hat. In the photo, you can see long hair sticking out of the hat. Keyes told investigators that he had short hair at the time and that the hair he used for his disguise was human, but not his own. When investigators followed up about the hair, Keyes told them that human hair is free if you just take it. Both incidents occurred on February 16, 2012, after he returned from being stuck in the mud. Records obtained from the car rental agency showed that Keyes put 2,847 miles on the blue Kia Soul he rented in Houston from February 12th to the 18th.
You already know about, or you already have a lot of information about the bank robbery in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, I can give you arson in Texas. I burned a house down, but I want a cigar for it.
Believe it or not, we have your cigar.
Well, we got just because you brought up the bank robbery. Have you seen these photos?
Yep.
You have seen them? Oh, we provide them in Discovery, right? Or
Yeah, well, my attorney said that you were looking at me for them. That's actually what made me start talking. It wasn't the Koenig thing.
was this bank robbery?
Yeah.
Oh. Did we didn't show you these photos when we first met? Did I?
No, he showed me them.
But we're not going to talk about your attorney or Koenig.
No.
Okay, but this is a bank robbery. You haven't been charged with it. I didn't know if you'd seen the photos for the
Yeah.
for the bank robbery, but pretty good photos.
Yeah. Cameras are getting better.
Yeah, because you seem to be a guy who's pretty aware of cameras. Am I right? Am I right?
Have to be nowadays.
I know. So did this one catch you by surprise, or what?
Huh? No.
You knew there was a camera there. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so I just figured.
I wasn't really concerned about it until I got arrested with the evidence.
Right. Have you ever heard the phrase, not your first rodeo? Have you heard that?
I told you we're only talking about stuff after the
Yeah, I hear you. But I mean, when people looked at this bank robbery and they saw the video, these are still shots, they said, this guy knows what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
It's not the old slip the note to one teller and get in one drawer.
Yeah.
That's a poor man's bank robbery.
Yeah, I'm just telling you what people had said to me when they saw the video.
Somebody who knew what he was doing.
So are you willing to talk to us maybe about that and the arson? If we
Yeah.
All right, so where did you want to start?
Well, you wanted to know about Texas. Town was called Alto. ALCO, Texas.
Alto, Texas? What part of Texas is that in?
It's south of Dallas.
Okay.
There was a news story on it too.
What kind of what time frame are we talking about?
Was the same day as the bank robbery.
February 16th?
Yeah, sounds right. And it was south of Alto. There was a house that I found that was in southwest of town that there wasn't anybody in. So I broke into it and took some stuff and then found some gasoline there, so just decided to burn it.
So it wasn't an abandoned house, and it was a
No.
lived-in house?
Well, I don't know. It looked like nobody had been there for a couple of weeks, but it was a mess. It was like a hoarder house.
Could be this way too, right?
Maybe, yeah.
And what?
Probably the easiest way to find it is going to be to do
Search for the... Was there a
Google
news story?
search fire Alto, Texas. It's probably been the only one there since. It's not a very big town. They probably will have the address.
Yeah, so explain to us how you found this house.
Well, I was looking at banks in Alto.
What were you looking for in this case?
I just figured out how many cameras there were around, where was a good place to park the car, and how many people were going to be around, and how many roads there were out of town, things like that, how close they were to the freeway.
And so in this case, for the bank robbery, while we're waiting for that article, you smoked a cigar out back or something before you went in the bank? Do you remember that?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
The bank was in a different town the bank I ended up robbing was in a different town.
And that was Azle, right?
Yeah, where the bank was that I ended up hitting.
Right.
My thought originally was to start the fire as kind of a diversion, and but then I found a place in Alto, and I had some binoculars with me, so I was watching it. I was watching it burn and stuff, and then kind of lost track of time, and then decided that it actually brought in a lot of vehicles, like I brought in a lot of emergency vehicles because it ended up being a pretty big fire. And so I decided it was probably better to go to a town a little ways away.
How did you choose this town, Alto?
Well, it was a little ways off the freeway.
And so you burned the house just to see what kind of response you were going to get from the law enforcement?
Well, I mean, there was a bunch of stuff I took from the house too, so I don't know.
Stuff like what?
Jewelry and a couple other things. I was in there for a while. It was, like I said, it was a mess. Like, you could barely... Whoever lived there was a hoarder. Like, every room was packed, and so I was digging through everything. Finally got fed up with it and just took the jewelry and stuff, and then just decided to burn it.
Okay, but nobody was home.
No, but I mean, I was mostly looking for guns in the house, but like I say, it was so packed with stuff I couldn't really find anything. So,
How did you pick that house? What was it about that house that...
it was a ways out of town. It was I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 miles out of Alto. My thought was I couldn't really tell if there were local police in Alto or not. I never really found the police station, but I figured if I started the fire, then that would get them all away from town, and then I'd hit the bank right after that. But like I say, I was watching. I found a really good spot to watch the fire, so I was just watching the fire, and then next thing I knew, there were emergency vehicles coming from all over the place, like from the freeway and stuff, and I couldn't see everything that was going on there. I thought maybe it had caught some of the other houses on fire, so decided maybe it got too big, so I decided to just go to a different town.
How did you break in?
There was a garage near the house, like a garage workshop, and I think the garage door was actually open, or the latch on it was broken or something. So at first I just was parked there by the house, just kind of killing time until the bank opened. And then I got into the garage, and there were some tools and stuff in the garage, and some gas. And that's kind of when I started getting the idea to burn the house. And I think I found there was some kind of big piece of steel, like some kind of farming attachment. And I used that as a pry bar and just pried open one of the doors to the house. And I think it was the back door. And I don't know, it's been a while in the house.
How long do you think you were in there?
I don't know, maybe an hour or two.
Okay.
That morning.
What'd you do?
I was just digging around through stuff, and I actually found a bunch of pretty nice fur coats, but I had them all piled by the door, and then when I lit the fire, I forgot to grab them. So they all went up with the rest of us.
Did you see pictures? Did it look like a family lived there, or an older person?
I think it was an older person.
Were you worried about that person coming home?
No, it looked like, seems like I remember seeing a planner or a calendar or something on the wall, and it looked like the person did a lot of traveling back and forth between the East Coast, so I figured it didn't look like anyone had been there for a couple of weeks, maybe. My other thought was that it was an elderly person who lived there and they had died, because the place basically looked like it had just been abandoned.
It had power?
Yeah, it had power. The place was a freaking fire hazard. They had, like, extension cords, 2 or 3 freezers running around the house, and extension cords running to everything. And, so I don't know.
How did you start the fire? I know you said there was gas in the garage. Did you use the gas, or how did you start it?
Well, I took out, once I decided to burn it, I opened up the attic access and opened up all the windows around the house on the inside, and grabbed a bunch of clothes and made a trail of clothes and bedding and stuff from every room, like, to different parts of the house, and poured gas on the clothes all the way out to the back door. And then just lit it from the back door, and it went up really fast. And while that was burning, I went down to the garage and opened up the attic access in there, and took the gas that was left and torched that place too.
Was there a vehicle in the garage?
No, there was a horse trailer next to it. The place was packed with stuff. Like, looked like 50 years worth of somebody collecting stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. Anything else of interest in there to you?
No.
So then you watched for a while, you said?
Yeah, I drove back into Alto just to hang back a little bit and parked up on. There was a church there up on a hill, and I parked up by the church. It was also near one of the banks, so I was keeping an eye on one of the banks and had some binoculars with me and started watching the fire and kind of lost track of time doing that. And and then I decided there were just too many. It created a lot of traffic issues in town. Like there were a lot of people stopping, trying to see what was going on, and
So it kind of had the opposite effect.
yeah, kind of.
By the end of May, Keyes was beginning to feel like a caged animal while in jail. He was extremely unpredictable, and during a court appearance, he actually tried to escape. He was able to unlock his handcuffs and jump over a guardrail before being tackled and tased. Investigators were caught off guard and felt that all of the progress they'd been making with their negotiations was now in jeopardy. To make things worse, about a month later, the story that ran in Vermont naming Keyes in connection to the Currier case damaged their trust with Keyes even further. This is when Keyes began to realize that the more information he provided on other cases, he was opening himself up to potential delays in the justice system, risking other jurisdictions charging him with other crimes, and more information possibly getting out to the media. By the end of July, Keyes had lost interest in providing additional details on his other murders and essentially stopped communicating with investigators. This forced agents to try and solve other cases without Keyes' help, but that would prove to be no easy task. They continued to try and question Keyes about his other crimes using different approaches. In one interview, investigators showed Keyes photos of 3 missing people. One of them was a woman named Deborah Feldman from Hackensack, New Jersey, that went missing in April of 2009. Keyes denied involvement in the other 2 missing people, but said very little about Deborah. This is how they knew they were on to something. Deborah's name was spelled Debra. Investigators found an article on his computer that was unrelated to the missing Deborah Feldman from the photo, but was for a Deborah Deborah Feldman. Agents theorized that Keyes was searching for the missing Deborah Feldman, but didn't know the correct spelling of her name. In subsequent interviews with Keyes, he told investigators he did know more about her disappearance, but still refused to provide details. Keyes had admitted to killing a woman from the East Coast in April of 2009 and burying her body somewhere near Tupper Lake, New York. Investigators suspected that Deborah Feldman was the victim he was referring to. Deborah Feldman went missing on April 8th, 2009, around 10 a.m. Looking back at Keyes' travel history, we can see that Keyes was traveling through the East Coast at the same time Deborah went missing. He flew from Washington to New Hampshire from April 7th to the 14th of 2009, rented a car, and put over 1,000 miles on it. Keyes told investigators that on the same trip, he had traveled back through Vermont to bury the weapons cache that was used in the Currier murders. This is corroborated by a receipt in the case file from Keyes' stay at the same hotel he stayed in when he committed the murder of Bill and Lorraine Currier, the Handy Suites Hotel. Keyes had also told investigators about a bank robbery he committed on this trip in Tupper Lake on April 10th, 2009. While Keyes was still being cooperative, he gave investigators permission to search a boat he had stored in Neah Bay, Washington. 2 of the agents assigned to the case from Washington interviewed Keyes briefly in October. In this interview, Keyes was asked about a search of his jail cell that produced a journal entry where Keyes wrote about some of his victims in Washington. There were also 11 pictures of skulls drawn in blood, one of which had the words, "We are one," written beneath the skull. The writings mentioned a couple and 2 other victims independent of one another. Keyes refused to go into any detail about the writings or the drawings, but he admitted that the boat they searched was in fact used in the Washington murders.
Did you ever meet the other FBI agents out there that were before the 2 of us, Patrick and Stephanie, on any unrelated stuff? I know they were out there all the time for the years that you lived out there. Did you ever bump into them or anything?
No. The only interaction I had with any law enforcement out there was the Neah Bay Public Safety Department.
Okay.
We would come in and do work on their building. Yeah, I don't recall meeting any.
How many people live in Neah Bay on the reservation?
Probably about 2,000, 2,500.
It's smaller than I thought it was.
So when you first went out there, you didn't start working for the tribe right away. What were you doing to get by? What kind of work were you doing? Were you doing the normal type of stuff?
I was on unemployment.
Between the military and Neah Bay?
Yeah, and I had, my license was revoked at the time, so I was keeping my driving to a minimum. Then, it wasn't easy getting a job in Neah Bay. I'm one of the only white guys that lives there. Yeah.
Right.
How did you do that? Did you know somebody in the department or something?
Well, I interviewed for a few jobs, but, for the job they finally hired me for, they there just wasn't anybody else who had my qualifications. That's what got me the job. So I got the job in spite of myself.
Well, that's part of why I was asking, because we know it can be difficult, and so I thought maybe you had to establish yourself in the community before you had an opportunity to get a job. But it sounds like
It might have
all of
been
that.
some of that too. I mean, because I had lived there for a few months, so people knew it's a rumor mill there, so people kind of knew who I was and what I was doing there. But for the first year that I worked for the tribe, I wasn't that popular for working for them. It's kind of interesting to have the shoe on the other foot. You know?
They thought you were intruding or taking a job away from.
Right. Yeah. We were working on one of the buildings there or something, and have people drive by. Go home, white boy.
Really?
Well, it's certainly not the impression we got after you were there for a few years.
No, like I say, after a year, that was everybody pretty much. Well, all the work I did was so obvious. It was everything around town was like right out in the open, like public recreation areas and stuff. Everybody in town knew about it and knew who was doing it. So after about a year, it
Was better than what they were used to.
right. Yeah, there's generally speaking, most of the people who live in eBay are pretty cynical of whatever the tribe is doing. So they were pretty impressed with the immediate, because Parks and Recreation didn't exist till they hired me. It was a brand new idea, but they had it was an unpopular idea at first because they were paying out, a salary for something that people didn't think was going to do anything.
Is the reservation land just in Nia Bay, or does it? I mean, it's like they're like the town and then lots of land outside of Nia
Yeah,
Bay.
it's a pretty large reservation, and unlike some of the other reservations where there's pieces of land kind of scattered in an area, Nia Bay is pretty encompassing.
It's a beautiful piece of land all the way up on the northwestern tip of the state. It's pretty nice there. Right on the water.
I was wondering if we could talk to you a little bit about your early years in Washington, because that's kind of unclear to us, but you lived in Colville for a while?
Right.
When did your family move to Colville? Do you know roughly?
Wow. Well, they drove to Washington from Utah, and I think I was about 5 years old or something.
Okay, so quite a while.
Right.
Okay.
4 or 5.
And you lived there until you moved to Oregon for that year?
Right.
Okay. And then after Oregon, you moved to New York?
Yeah.
And then joined the Army and went to Fort Lewis?
Right.
Okay. When you were living in Colville, were you there in 96? If that sounds like the year.
Yeah. I would have been there. Yeah, I was there in 96. 97 was, I would say 98 was the year I went there, and 97 was the year I was in Oregon. So yeah, 96 would have been the last year, probably the last year.
Okay. When you were living in Colville, do you remember the case where Julie Harris, she was a double amputee, went missing? And they've got a suspect in the case, so we're not trying to, talk to you about you being involved in that. But
96?
yeah, she lived, I think, pretty close to you, and she went missing, and they
I
found
do
her.
remember hearing about that.
And
She was young, I think, like 11 or 12.
I remember the name. I don't remember the details of the story. I remember that it seemed like it was a pretty big deal. It was in local news and stuff, and I was working construction at the time, so I would hear stuff. But I never took a personal interest in it.
Okay.
It's kind of one of those passing interest kind of things.
Sounds like it was pretty big news, so just kind of didn't know if that had any impact
That's
on you.
probably why I remember it. But it was, I don't remember enough of the details. My thoughts were at the time.
Yeah, we've been pouring through missing persons reports and doing all that kind of stuff, trying to come up with possibles. We both realize that we're not solving any of the Washington stuff without you. Just not going to happen. Any clues or bones you can throw us to keep us busy until that time, you can talk to us. I mean, I've been puzzled about your. You seem adamant that there's no possible federal nexus to Washington cases, and I'm just shocked because knowing the peninsula like we do, there's so much federal land out there, especially with the national forests, national parks, and my understanding then would be that nothing's happened on those type of lands. Are we correct in understanding that, or?
No, I didn't know that would qualify as a federal crime. Well, if it's a national park or something.
National park or national forest, we could have jurisdiction on a felony.
I think you're going to be more curious about the caches and stuff now, too. How many caches are there?
In Washington?
Washington, United States, Canada.
The idea with caches is to have something everywhere.
Wherever you might never know when you're going to feel the need.
I'm not
Tied
a
to
stay-at-home kind of guy, so.
So there's a lot of them.
Well, I don't.
a dozen?
No.
Jeez, it's not, that won't be that hard.
Yeah.
We got that. How many in Washington? One relative. How about
At least one in Washington.
At least one. Is there one that's not relative that we could look for?
No. They're all relative?
Well, relevant to, I know you said there's one in Washington relevant to stuff and maybe talking about in the future. But yeah.
Well, they're all relevant.
That's what you have them for, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because a lot of the stuff in them, at the time that I buried it, it's not mine, so.
Any other bones for these guys?
No, not literally, sorry.
I didn't even mean it that way, but okay.
Can I ask the writings that they had found in your cell way back? Any of those Washington victims that were described?
Oh, DOC gave you that stuff they took? Yeah, I don't remember exactly what. I mean, yeah.
One of those is
Probably.
victim, probably. Okay.
So anything else from, Washington, any questions, anything you can think of? I mean, we're not going to be here much longer, so, I'm not sure what you could ask, but it's an opportunity. So we're heading back that way, so.
No, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, Washington was quite a while ago now. That was, when did I leave there? 06 or 07?
So,
Yeah.
but you go back there fairly frequent. When you stop through there, you
I used to stop through a lot more.
check on the cash.
Well, there were stops that I made there that I try to maximize my time, multitask.
Efficient.
Right. So I just haven't had as much reason to stop and watch.
Several search warrants were carried out in the course of the investigation after Keyes stopped cooperating. An additional search was conducted on the house in Anchorage, as well as a property his family owned in Constable, New York. The property in New York had been lived in by Keyes and his family sometime in 1997. The property was in bad shape when investigators searched it. The roof was caved in, and it was not in any condition for someone to live in. It had mostly been used by hunters over the years. Keyes told investigators he visited the property every time he went back to the East Coast, but denied burying any bodies on the property, committing any murders, or leaving anything there that was related to any of his crimes. In Keyes' final interview with investigators on November 29, 2012, they took a trip down memory lane and asked him questions about the property while they tried to get him to talk once more about his other victims. It was obvious by Keyes' demeanor that his attitude about the legal process was different than it had been in earlier interviews. He seemed like he was being backed into a corner by investigators who confronted him with the fact that Vermont was ready to file charges against him for the murder of the couriers. I think that this is when Keyes decided he wasn't going to play by their rules anymore, and his plan to end his own life was set into motion. Investigators thought they were making progress with Keyes to discuss the Tupper Lake bank robbery and possibly get additional clues about his other murders. They made plans for the following week to set up a live feed that would allow Keyes to take them through the area of Tupper Lake. However, Keyes had no plans of making that meeting. This story doesn't have a happy ending. We don't get all of the answers, and the families don't get closure or justice for this case. In fact, we're left with far more questions than we will ever have answers. Israel Keyes took his secrets to the grave with him when on December 2nd, 2012, he ended his own life in his jail cell after he was given a razor to shave with by an employee of the jail. A blood-soaked note written on yellow legal paper was found in Keyes' cell after he was discovered. The note was so badly soaked in blood that it had to be sent to the lab to be cleaned up before it was able to be read. I'm not going to read you what the note said. You can find it online, but it's mostly just rambling nonsense, and investigators determined that it didn't reveal any additional clues to help solve the other murders. After Keyes' death, the FBI opened the case to the public in an effort to solve his other murders. A flurry of tips flowed in, but to this day, Samantha Koenig and Bill and Lorraine Currier are the only murders that have been confirmed to be victims of Keyes. The FBI still considers the case to be open and actively works new leads as they come in. Several missing persons cases have been linked to Keyes in the media. However, the FBI has only ever made an official connection to one missing person that Keyes did not outright outright admit to. That person was Deborah Feldman. As I said before, the FBI believes that Keyes is responsible for 11 murders. But with Keyes' extensive travel history, both in and out of the U.S., it's difficult to say how many victims he actually had. There are hundreds of theories about the cases Keyes may be connected to, but unfortunately, without his help, we may never know the true extent of his crimes. Keyes buried many caches in the woods across the U.S. that may contain evidence related to his victims, and the FBI has a detailed record of his travel history, phone, and financial records that have all been made public on the FBI's vault. If you have a tip for the FBI about this case, you can report it to the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it on social media and leave a 5-star rating. I will be back with another case in 2 weeks, so subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen so you'll be notified when the next episode drops. Thank you for listening to Buried Evidence, a true crime podcast.